Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the podcast here on bigcountryhomepage.com. It's Abilene People, where we sit down with Abilene's most interesting people. And money back guarantee today, we've got one. It's David Bacon, anchor at KRBC TV. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. I find this interesting that I'm one of Abilene's interesting people. So thank you.
Well, see, there, even if you weren't, now you are because you find it interesting.
That's right.
Well,
Well,
you're one
thank
of
you.
Abilene's interesting people. And you find it interesting that you're on that side, not this side.
I was sitting here as we were sitting down to do this thing, and all of a sudden, I'm not asking the questions.
That's
This
kinda
is
weird,
this is an unusual role for me, so I'll try to do my best.
Well, you know, it's funny. Our weekend anchor on KRBC, Noah McKinney, sat down with a guest he had done a story about, and it was hard for him because he's the reporter. You know, that reporter in him. He wanted to take that mic. I said, no, let me try for a while, and it was great.
It's my turn. Okay.
And you're going to be great. So, okay, David, you are born and raised Abilene, Texas, correct?
Well, actually, I was born in Dallas, but
Okay.
we moved here when I was less than 4 years old. My dad took a new job with Merchants Fast Motor Lines in the late 1950s, but I was born in Dallas, and then we moved here in the late 50s.
And you grew up here. As a little boy.
And then graduated, went through Austin Elementary, Madison Middle School, Cooper High School. Then I went away for 10 years. I went to college, graduated from SMU, then worked at TV stations in Midland, Odessa, San Antonio, got the big city itis, went to St. Louis for 18 months and decided it's time to come home.
But St. Louis is a great city.
It was.
Yeah.
I just ran into 3 job horror situation.
Okay.
No, it was just
Yeah.
one of those
Oh,
things.
yeah.
But
Time to come home.
I thought at the time, I'll come back to Abilene, stay for a couple of years, and then go back out to the big markets. But found that I liked it here and have found a home here ever since.
So why SMU? I'm sure that you could have played football anywhere.
No, I'm a second generation Mustang. My parents met at SMU. So I'm a second generation Mustang. I'm very proud of that. And I'm glad you asked. If I could be allowed to tell a story about
Please
my
do.
mother went to SMU on an academic scholarship, and she met my dad there. Dad had fought in World War II, had never given any thought to going to college. But after he was honorably discharged from the Navy, he was a CB at Okinawa in World War II, fought at Okinawa. And then after he was honorably discharged when the war was over with, he's riding the train along with his other veterans from the Pacific, from San Diego back to Dallas, and they were all talking about going to college on the GI Bill. He had not given a single thought of going to college.
Maybe you wasn't even aware of the GI Bill or how to take advantage of it.
And he was learning about that, so he's riding the train back, and they planted the seed. All these guys, well, I'm going to go to college. What are you going to do now? I'm going to go to college, take advantage of the GI Bill. Dad had not really thought about that. And he thought his father, my grandfather, was in the trucking industry in Dallas. And he thought, I'll just go home and drive a truck for my dad. But these guys said, well, take advantage of the GI Bill, Richard. Go to school. And then when he went to First Methodist in Dallas, met all of his old classmates and friends again after he got home from the war. And they all said, well, Richard, take advantage of the GI Bill. Go to SMU. And so the final tipping point was he went to Crozier Tech High School in Dallas to get his transcript and ran into one of his old teachers. And the teacher said, Bacon, what are you doing here? And he said, well, I'm getting my transcript so I can go to SMU. And the guy said, you, SMU? That's not going to work. And that's what made Dad mad. And not only was he the first person from his family to attend college, he was also the first to graduate from college in his family.
It's a great story.
And Dad, after that, he put 3 boys through SMU and then set up funds for his grandkids to all go to college wherever they wanted to. So education was important to my dad.
I thought that you had some siblings who also went to SMU,
Yes.
so proud Mustang.
Right.
So recently, they've been a great football team. You had to have enjoyed those.
Last year going back, especially after wandering around for years after the death penalty, we were in the Southwest Conference, then it broke up. We went to the Western Athletic Conference for a while, Conference USA, then the American Conference. And then finally, 2 years ago, we got invited, SMU did, to go into the ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference. And then the question, can you compete? Well, yeah, we did just fine. We won the football championship, got into the playoffs. Our basketball team got into postseason play. So we proved SMU could compete in a P4 conference and do just fine. And when I went back to my 50th anniversary for my class recently, the speaker at commencement was like when Dr. Gerald Turner, who was retiring after 30 years at SMU as the president, they said, well, thanks to Dr. Turner, we're now playing football games against schools we had heard of again.
Nice.
So it's great to be in the ACC.
And your KRBC partner there at the desk, Abby Green, is a graduate of Oklahoma University.
Yes, she is.
Sometimes, occasionally, we'll tease her a little bit about
Just a little.
But last year, SMU did have a football team that was certainly as good or better than OU. So that must have been fun.
Like to remind her of that. Yeah, we got into the college football playoff, got in over Alabama, so it was a good year for the Mustangs.
I thought we just had to bring it up.
Yes.
We can move on. We can
talk about it as long as you want to.
So how long have you been on TV in Abilene? Now, I know you took a time off because your kids' interests, you didn't want to be tied up every weeknight on TV.
When it was December of 81, I came back to KTAB in December of 81. And stayed on air doing sports till March of 2005. Michael, at that point, was starting to get old enough. He was playing Little League Baseball. He was playing basketball. And I wanted to start seeing, I'd seen everybody else's kids play. I wanted to see my kids play. And my daughter was involved in various activities as well. And so whenever I'd be going to events at night, I'd spend the whole time looking at my watch. You know, do I have enough time to get back? And so a sales opportunity came along, and I moved into sales for about 12, 13 years. And it gave me a chance to see Michael play. Later, when he became head basketball coach at Ballinger, I got to go down to Ballinger several times a week.
And by the way, somewhere at one of his stops, he won a state championship.
I'm glad you asked.
Oh, yeah.
We all worked in college. We all had college jobs. Well, his junior year at ACU, he got a job as the assistant boys basketball coach at Abilene Christian High School,
which has a fantastic basketball tradition.
Right, and it's not a teaching position; it's a contract situation. And the guy who was the head coach, his Monday through Friday job transferred him to Austin. So ACHS took a chance on Michael, and his senior year in college, he's the head boys basketball coach at Abilene Christian High School. And they won the Texas State Championship that year. And then his next year, they got to the state semifinals before they lost, and maybe in overtime. But, you know, his first 2 years as head coach, he wins the state championship and gets to the state tournament.
Did you tell him, Michael, it's not going to always be like this? There's going to be years where you don't win district.
And he did that while he was going to college. And that when he graduated in August, for the August ceremony, Dr. Phil Schubert, president of ACU, that was his first year as president. And so when they were doing the graduating class and Schubert was the commencement speaker, Michael was the first one he talked about, saying, this class is already contributing. They're graduating tonight, but many of them are already contributing. And the first one he talked about was Michael, who had won a state championship as the boys basketball coach at ACHS.
And did you stand up and say, that's my boy?
I'm mine.
Yeah, that's fun. That's a lot of fun. So you've been on TV in Abilene a long time.
Right.
But I think you'll know where I'm headed with this. You've actually been in the TV station even longer because as a little boy, we'll tell the story.
Well, back when it was KRBC, used to when South 14th became a two-lane road at Pioneer over here in Tanglewood, and KRBC sat out here all by itself. But we lived over on Tanglewood Road, and so you could get into this TV station at night. Back doors were left open, and
now it's not that way any longer. But back then,
but you could get in. And KRBC radio was still here, and at night it was the top 40 station everybody listened to, and so we could get in. I remember walking down the hallways, ran into Larry Fitzgerald. You know, they didn't. You couldn't do that today, but it was accommodating to me even as a small child. We used to come down here and hang out.
Now, who would have thought that little kid, that Larry Fitzgerald said, hey, kid, what are you doing in here, would one day be the anchor on KRBC TV?
It's a small world.
That's fantastic. So looking back, when did you say, you know what, I want to do TV? When did you say that?
I was one of those weird kids. They're called nerds now, but back when I was growing up, I knew in the 7th grade what I wanted to do. I don't know, all of a sudden it just opened up one day. I was in the 7th grade. I want to be involved with radio TV. And I can remember I think a lot of it was my dad was listening to the old Colt 45, now Astro games. When I was a kid growing up, when we were traveling on trips, he would always be listening to the games on the radio. We always listened to SMU games every Saturday afternoon on the old Exxon network when the Southwest Conference existed. And then at night, of course, this was long before ESPN. So instead of going up and down the TV dial trying to find college football on Saturday nights, I was going up and down the radio dial. Like you could listen to John Ferguson and LSU football on KWKH out of Shreveport or WWL in New Orleans. And I just remember listening to those guys with these great voices and the crowds would be going wild. I thought, I want to do that. That is the coolest thing on the face of the earth. And so 7th grade on, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. You know, they're kids, you kids today in college, they're junior, seniors. They really don't know sometimes what they want to do. I knew what I wanted to do all along.
Things have changed, haven't they? Even as you say that, I think about that sound from tuning a radio, the old AM days.
You go up and down the dial, voice, where's this coming from? And you know, or you could listen to stations all up and down the dial. It was great.
And you could sometimes get all the way that big station in St. Louis,
KMOX.
Yeah, KMOX. Yeah. And you said you listen to Shreveport and such. It's kind of interesting. I don't know that people do that so much today, but that harkens back to an era where you can think of a kid dreaming, man, I'd like to do that. And you ended up doing it. Yeah. And sometimes still today, I bet you have to pinch yourself and say, am I really doing this?
It is so much fun. I enjoy it so much. And the old adage, you've never worked a day in your life. Well, I sort of feel that way. It's just I really enjoy coming to work. I like what I do. I enjoy it, and really feel like I'm contributing and getting a chance to work with people like Abby and you and others in the newsroom.
Well,
and
you know, and mentor. You know, I mean, you're at that place now where you have so much experience. You can just almost by osmosis share some insights in, you know, professionalism and how to be on camera.
Thank you.
I mean, but that's true, right? And you take pride in that. I would assume you do.
Right. Well, you're very kind, but yes, I like to try to share it and, you know, and there's always a way to approach that. May I make a suggestion?
Yeah. I think you've done that with me a time or two, and it's always panned out really well. So you are a huge sports fan, and that was your start. Your niche was in the sports, and I remember those days well, and I remember the T-shirt. There was a
I burn bacon. Yeah.
It was an I burn bacon thing where you would pick games on a given week against David Bacon. And if you beat him, you got a T-shirt. And those things are still to this day treasured items. And occasionally somebody will see one on eBay.
Yeah,
we'll hear about it, right?
Somebody was like, found one for $20 or something like that on eBay. Several years ago at Business Expo, a gentleman walked up to me at the KRBC booth and said his mother had recently passed away. They were going through her things in the back drawer in the back dressing room, back in the back bedroom. They opened up a drawer and neatly folded in the back were like 2 or 3 I Burn Bacon T-shirts. Would I like to have them? Well, of course I'd like to have them. But
I really wondered if you weren't going to tell that story and say he got you to sign them. Because, I mean, people take pride in having those. I ran across a guy, and it may have also been at Business Expo, and he was bragging to me, oh, man, I've got so many of those T-shirts. And I said, yeah, right. If you do, bring them. Of course, I never heard from the guy again. But people do take pride in that. It's a lot of fun.
And one of the ones who loved playing it the most was Dr. Thomas Kemp, who was president of McMurry. And he loved playing that contest. And he won like 20 or 30 T-shirts himself. We had a luncheon one day up at McMurry, and he put all of his T-shirts out for everybody to see.
That's a lot of fun. Of course, Dr. Kemp passed away, 10 years ago now. Yeah. And, you know, when we think about the people that we've known, that we've worked with, who some of them are long gone, some of them are still around, but who have you enjoyed working with over the years? Characters. I'm curious. Did you ever work with the gentleman Harry Holt, or did you ever?
Never. He was always
he was on the other station.
He was on KRBC before before I got here.
Yeah.
Well, I've worked down through the one there are two I'd like to really say a huge thank you to. First off, a gentleman by the name of Lynn Johnson, who was my mentor when I was a kid growing up at St. Paul United Methodist Church, and he was the church administrator, but he did a morning newscast on KWKC radio called Abilene High and Cooper Games on Friday night. A gentleman. And when I got that desire, he was the one who sort of, pushed me along and helped me get my first job as a Sunday night disc jockey at KWKC, and was the one who put in a good recommendation for me. And so he was the one that I always really helped get me started. And so I could never say thank you enough to him. He's long since passed, sadly, but he was such a great gentleman. And then Larry Fitzgerald, who hired me and brought me back to Abilene. I had a lot of personal issues going on at the time. Larry reached out to me, and we made the deal. I didn't get here as fast as I should have, as it turned out, but he stuck with me and helped me as I was transitioning back, get back to TV, and help open the door for me here at KTAB. And so between those two, and they were two pillars. I mean, Len was on the radio here for decades, and Larry is the father of TV news in Abilene. And so those two are really important to me. And so thank you for giving me a chance to say thank you to those two gentlemen who helped me.
Well, of course, and again, now you're in that role and helping others, but that's how it goes. That we pass on. Somebody once said the best people are not reservoirs that hold it all in, but the rivers that pass it on. And I see you that way. So a couple of years ago now, KRBC celebrated its 70th anniversary because it started in 1953. Mm-hmm. And we talked back in a couple of years ago, those fun stories and such. Over the years, KRBC has had a lot of really well-known personalities at the desk. Do you ever, or have you ever thought, wow, I'm carrying on a legacy here. I'm in Abilene's first TV station. Or do you give it no thought?
I'm glad you mentioned that. The 70th anniversary really brought it back to me. KRBC was the first, even dating back, KRBC Radio was the first radio station in Abilene, and then they made the transition to TV, so it's the first TV station. And when we moved here in the late 50s, it was KRBC and Channel 12, and those were the only two stations, and KRBC was the one everybody watched. There were times they had like 80% of the audience. So this station has always been important to Abilene and the Abilene community, as well as the big country, because this is one of the first TV stations in this whole part of the state.
Yeah.
And so I do like carrying on that legacy that, that people like Larry and James Hallmark and Downing Bowles and all those guys who were so instrumental in KRBC. This was the first TV station, like we were saying in that promo. I think the first day KRBC was ever on the air in 1953, they had a 10 o'clock newscast. So news has been important to KRBC literally since day one. And so I really feel honored and hope I am doing the best I can to carry on that legacy that was established by Larry and James and Downing and all those who preceded me in that role.
Now, I don't know that it was Larry, but you can help me think who it might have been. But the name isn't really all that important. When TV started here, again, way back in 1953, of course, nobody had ever been on TV before. There was no such thing as a TV anchor. Nobody had ever been a reporter. Nobody ever sat at a news desk in this city. So KRBC was the first.
Right.
And the radio station, as you said, pre-existed the TV station. And so there were some radio personalities. And my understanding is the very first anchor was drafted to be the TV anchor because his vast TV experience was he had been to Dallas and stood at a store and watched a bunch of TVs and came back and told that story. Have I got it right?
You've got most of it. It's James Hallmark is who you're talking about.
James Hallmark.
James Hallmark.
Thank you.
And he was on KRBC Radio, and they had, evidently, they got their TV license, and they had the staff meeting. We've got the license. And most of the staff announcers were like, well, this is unknown. I don't know anything about it. Radio's a known quantity. I want to stay with radio. And you're right. James Hallmark was sort of drafted to be on KRBC TV because he had been to Fort Worth. His aunt lived in Fort Worth. He had seen Channel 5 in Fort Worth, the first TV station in Texas. So he at least knew what it was and had some concept of what it was. And so that's why James was drafted to go over on KRBC TV. And what a great guy to have as one of your first standard bearers in the business. And you're right, he has written a little short pamphlet about that and the fact that they were pioneers back in those days. Everything that was going on in KRBC in 1953 in those early days, they were just going by the seat of their pants.
Everything was new.
Yeah,
Nobody had done it before.
Right, exactly.
Okay, you've also got another story back from those same days, and we'll catch up to the future of the present and the future here in a minute. But I love the story you tell of, I don't know, was it Slim Willett or somebody, and they used to drive cars into your studio.
Well, it was Slim Willett, and he was a country music, and he turned out he was a bigger deal than I think a lot of us realize now. He died early. He was like 43 or something like that when he died of a heart attack in the mid 60s. But at one point, he was a big deal. He wrote a song that was recorded by Perry Como and became a huge hit.
Well, and by the way, his show is the show that the Gatlin brothers premiered on 70 years ago. But go ahead.
Right. So Slim had a live TV show. And of course, back in those days, a lot of it was live. And so he was going to ride, his Slim Willett's major sponsor was Western Chevrolet. And so he was going to drive a brand new Chevrolet onto the set for the start of the Slim Willett TV show. And he was going to drive this new model on. He'd get out of the car. They'd sing the opening song. Well, most TV studios have really slick concrete. And evidently he might have come in a little bit faster than what he was thinking. Threw on the brakes. It skidded into the set, live TV, crashed the set, and he still has to get out and sing the opening song while this car is wrecked behind him. So anyway, that was a story of the early days of TV here at KRBC.
That's fantastic. Now, do you remember that story, or do you remember stories about that story?
Oh, I've heard stories about it. And there were similar stories. My first TV job was in Midland, and they had a funny story for a lot. Like I said, everything was live back in those days. And so this guy was supposed to be doing a live TV commercial for a seat cover process that would prevent cigarette burns. Because people smoked. The windows were rolled down, you smoked cigarettes, and the ashes would fall on the seats and leave a burn mark. Well, this was some process that you could put on your car seat, and then that way it wouldn't leave it. If an ash fell on it, it wouldn't leave a burn mark. Well, the idea was this guy had a little seat sample, and the idea was he was just supposed to squeeze a little lighter fluid on it.
Oh, boy.
Well, they didn't explain that right. So he just starts dousing this little seat sample with lighter fluid. Now watch this, and strikes a match. Now this was a KMID, and this was like in the middle of some major TV show back in the 60s, early 60s, and it was a company called Seat Cover Race. And when I worked at KMID in the mid-70s, Seat Cover Race still was not back on TV with them because of this incident. He lights a match. It just becomes an instant inferno. He says a 4-letter word, throws the seat cover, and the producer or the director had been told, never go to black. So the cameraman follows this seat as he throws it over in the corner. It's sitting over in the corner, crackling and burning and smoking, and then he lets out more 4-letter words. Did you see that almost kill me? Seat Cover Race never went back on KMID ever again.
That's great. It's a different,
the live TV days.
Different day, different time. Yeah, right. I don't even know how that can happen. Well, your newscast is live,
right.
But you're not driving cars and lighting fires on set.
Right. Well, and there were other funny stories. They used to pull pranks on one another on the air, but all that is, of course, that was like before right now is so much scripted and it's already taped and already done in advance. Well, so those days of live TV, you just don't have it much anymore. It
begs the question: have you ever pulled a prank on anybody on air, or maybe you have and you've never told anybody? Now's your chance, but we can move right along. Let
me think about that for a minute.
Now you love sports. We've already established that. I want to talk about, you're the voice of McMurry football, right?
Yes,
you have been for a while.
Yes.
So you enjoy doing that. Do you do away games too, or just home games? How does that work?
I've been doing home and away games now for the last decade, and before that I was doing color. What I really enjoy about doing the football, because that's what I grew up. When I was a kid growing up, that was one of the things that got me interested in going on radio TV. You remember the Southwest Conference and the Exxon Network.
Yeah.
I grew up listening to guys like Kern Tips and Connie Alexander, Frank Fallon, Jack Dale, Eddie Hill. Now, don't ask me what I ate for lunch yesterday, but I can remember all those guys who called Southwest Conference football. They were so good. They were so good. And listening to them, I thought, I want to do that. And to me, what I really enjoy doing by play-by-play is you can sort of script your pregame show, and you can sort of script what you're going to do at halftime. But once the game starts, you don't know what's going to happen.
Oh, it's Slim Willett in a skidding car.
So you don't know what's going to happen. So how do you describe, especially on radio, where you're painting the picture for that listener at home of what's going on? And if you're doing your job with the theater of the mind, if I'm describing it right, then you can close your eyes and visualize what's going on. So that's what I really, truly enjoy. Am I up to that challenge of painting that picture for the listener at home or listening in their car, that they can know exactly what's going on during the course of a ball game and describe it well enough that they know what's happening? And it's just the challenge of being able to do that and describe it properly is what I really, truly enjoy the most, and be prepared for that.
It's got to be a lot of fun.
And when the team's winning, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm sure. And you also love baseball. You love the Texas Rangers. And I think you have a distinction of having attended the opening game in a number of the Ranger stadiums. And
I was at the first game they ever played at Arlington Stadium in April of 1972, when they had just moved from Washington and became the Texas Rangers. Saw the last game they ever played at Arlington Stadium, which was also the last game for George Brett and Nolan Ryan. They both ended their Hall of Fame careers on that same day. That was the last game they were ever involved in. Saw the first game at what's now called Choctaw Stadium, but the ballpark in Arlington. Saw the last game they ever played at the old ballpark in Arlington. And the first time they were allowed fans in, because they opened Globe Life Field, COVID.
Yeah, that's right.
So the first game they allowed fans to come to, they played Toronto, and I was at that game too.
And there was thought about naming Globe Life Field David Bacon Field, right?
Well, that was nice of them to consider. I'm sure it went by the wayside pretty quick.
So do you get over there and go to games very often?
I've already been to a couple of games this year, but now I don't get over there as much as I like, but still I go.
And as we're recording this, for most of the season, they were not doing well. They would pitch well but couldn't hit. But all of a sudden, they're hitting and they're winning. And I don't know what they did yesterday.
They won at Los Angeles last night.
But lost the game before, but won last night.
Right. So they're 4 to 5 games out of first place.
But they're only like one game out of the wild card.
Well, I think they're tied for the wild card.
So
they're very much in the playoff picture after a slow start.
So I don't think I've ever once asked you for an update on the Rangers that you didn't do just what you just did. You know it. You follow it. You love it. It's just kind of interesting. And you also love the Dallas Cowboys. And, in fact, we have a lot of fun because KRBC hosts the Sunday night football on NBC as an NBC affiliate, is home to the Sunday night football game. And so you and Abby have the local news immediately after the conclusion of the Sunday night football game every year. And that's a lot of fun when it's a Dallas game particularly. And we have fun with those promos. Right. And you always wear a Cowboys tie or, black or a helmet or something. It's a lot of fun, I would like a prediction.
Mm-hmm.
Will the Cowboys go back to at least the NFC playoffs and at least the second game of the playoffs anytime? Can we expect that anytime in the near future?
There was an encouraging, I would have said 24 hours ago, I would have said, nah. But I saw an encouraging sign, or what I felt was an encouraging sign at practice yesterday. I was reading about this today. Brian Schottenheimer, the new coach, evidently they've had several issues with fights at training camp during some of the practices. And evidently yesterday, Schottenheimer stopped practice and said, the problem around here is the lack of discipline. Talent's not the issue, it's a lack of discipline. And he made them run laps. He stopped practice yesterday and made professional football players run laps to try to drive home the message, this stupid stuff has got to stop. And that kind of stuff, you go back and look at the Jimmy Johnson era and the Tom Landry era. Well, especially Jimmy Johnson, the talent was there. And in the Landry era, talent ebbed and flowed, but they were disciplined. They didn't do dumb stuff. And that's what drove me crazy, especially the last 10 to 12 years. There was no accountability of people players would make dumb decisions or dumb penalties or things that never would have happened under Tom Landry or Jimmy Johnson. But that has creeped into the culture ever since Johnson left. So I found that very encouraging yesterday. Schottenheimer said, we're not putting up with this, and made him run laps.
Well, you got to hope, too, that he doesn't have a little bit of triangulation going where a player might go to somebody, say maybe the owner, general manager, and they go, oh, forget it, it's okay. You know, you hope that Schottenheimer really has the keys in his hand and can drive this thing.
I thought the fact that he stopped practice and lectured him and then made him run laps, which I thought that was okay. Now I'm a little encouraged. So thinking, okay, that's a good sign. Sending the message, we got to have more discipline.
A few years ago, we don't have to talk about the event, but there was an event here in town, and the Hall of Fame quarterback from the Buffalo Bills spoke, Jim Kelly, and his wife, Jim and Jill, and you introduced Jim. And I can't remember exactly. I happened to be at that event. I just can't remember exactly, though. There was some story. I don't know. Maybe I hate to put you on the spot because maybe I'm fouling up the whole story, but either you knew some detail about Jim or his career, but anyway, he was a nice guy, very nice guy.
Very nice. The story you might be talking about was Marv Levy, the head coach of the Buffalo Bills.
That's it. Thank you. That's it.
When I got to cover 2 Super Bowls, and I was still on the air at KTAB doing sports, Super Bowl 28 and Super Bowl 30. Super Bowl 28 in Atlanta. Cowboys are playing the Buffalo Bills. And this is the 4th straight Super Bowl appearance for the Bills. And Marv Levy was telling this story. He had a weekly radio show in Buffalo at the time. And so they had this one guy who would always call in every week on Levy's show. You're not using the right message. Football is war. Football is war. And you got to drive home that message. And this is every week this guy would call in, and it was driving Levy crazy. So finally, midway through the season, they say, well, here he is. This guy's calling again. And Levy said, okay, put him on the air. And so the caller, once again, on Levy's show goes about how football is war. You're not coaching them right. Football is war. And Levy starts telling this story. We did some research after a call you made, and we found out that when the D-Day landing at Normandy, when the American troops are coming out of those barges to charge up against the French coast, facing those German guns, and they're holding their rifles over their head going, this is football, this is football.
Yeah, right. That's great. That's great. Did you share that story with Jim?
Yes, I did.
Okay, I'm sure he liked it.
But Marv Levy, it was funny at that point. Jimmy Johnson was very buttoned down, and Jimmy Johnson talked about at one of those Super Bowl news conferences about how he would use the media to send messages to players, and he has a degree in psychology, and you could really tell that he was using that degree in psychology. Levy got up and started telling all these funny stories, especially the caller. Well, this is football. This is football.
So, where do you see, those of us who work for a TV station? Of course, again, you've been in the business a long time and have seen a lot of changes. But we're conversing all the time with all the changes in media and digital media and everything. Where do you see? Let me preface it this way. I'll prejudice it, I guess. I think local TV is here to stay. I mean, come on. People still turn to David Bacon for their local news. And not that they can't get it online, bigcountryhomepage.com. There's a plug.
Right.
A lot of online sources for local news. But still, local TV, research shows, data shows. And I think just cornbread common opinion shows still is where people turn for local news. Agree, disagree?
Oh, I agree 100%. And our parent company, Nexstar, really pushes local, and I think that's very important, especially when you look at the media landscape here in Abilene right now. When I was growing up, the Abilene Reporter News, you could go out in the morning and you'd see a copy of the newspaper in everybody's front yard.
Everybody, always.
Well, all the way up and down the street.
Kids would throw the paper for a job.
Exactly.
When we see that last.
And you had 4 AM radio stations and 2 FM stations, and now we got more than 20. But out of all of those, none of them do any local news other than what they might get online or fed to by one of the TV stations. Sadly, right now, I see the local media's landscape shrinking a little bit because the paper is not a factor much anymore, as much as I hate to say it. Local radio hasn't been a factor in 25 years as far as any local news coverage that they have generated on their own. So it's down to the TV stations to provide that local content. So I think it's very important. And I think as long as TV stations provide local content, then they can survive in this changing landscape. Yes, you can watch all these shows on Netflix and Apple and Paramount Plus. Oh yeah, the entertainment's out there. But when it comes to what you want to know, local news and information, there are very few sources for that, and those sources are shrinking. So I think our mantra of local, we put local at the end of every newscast because we're really trying to concentrate on local news. And I think if you can stay local, then you've got a chance to survive in this changing media landscape.
KRBC, Abilene's local news. All right. So last question, I think. I've said that before. There's 6 more to come, but I think it's the last question. What would you like to see Abilene do or be in 10 years? You know, I'm just it can be general or specific. You know, what would you like to see happen in our city?
I'm so encouraged by the fact that all of a sudden Lancium is built. Have you been out there to see Lancium?
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And then they're talking about a similar facility on the northeast side of town up by Hamby that we just announced, or the news broke this week about Shackelford County, close to Abilene. Who's going to get one of those facilities?
Where do you get your news?
So I'm very encouraged by the direction Abilene is going right now. The thing, I want to say this, Abilene has really changed, obviously, in my lifetime. I wish the church influence is what I miss the most. Because, you know, our church attendance, where I attend church, it's steady, but you'd like to see more young families come in. And that'd be the thing I'd like to see more of, is more of the heavy religious influence that there was in this town for so long. And I think, you know, when Sunday blue laws went into effect, when the Sunday blue law went out of effect, all of a sudden, all places, you know, Sunday afternoon, you couldn't go do anything in Abilene. You went to church on Sunday. That's what you did.
That was it.
And now you see people at shopping stores, and I'm not being critical. It's just, you know, observe that
culture has changed.
Culture has changed. And so I'm encouraged by the growth we're seeing, the health of the 3 local universities, the Lanciums and the Vantage data, and all these power plants, like, you know, Haskell's going to have nuclear reactors and all this stuff. So I'm really encouraged by all that. I like seeing that. I wish that religious influence that we grew up with in this town would still have more of an influence than what I'm seeing right now.
Well, I mean, I think well said. And that's an interesting perspective. All the guests who answer that question, you don't, it's a little bit like Forrest Gump. You know, you don't know what kind of box of chocolate or what kind of chocolate you get out of the box. I don't know what kind of answer you're going to get. I think that's the first. We'd like to see more influence from our religious institutions answer that I can recall. And I think it's a really thoughtful, reflective answer.
Because you look at some of some of the news stories we do, and I think if somebody had a moral compass or a stronger moral compass, some of these horrible crime stories that we report on wouldn't be happening. That a lot of that would not go on if we had if there was a stronger religious influence in some people's lives. And I think that's when you look at some of these things, you know, how on earth, you know, some of these child abuse stories, horrible child, you know, that's sickening. And I hate to have to report it. I think it's important that we report it so people know this is going on. It's not a Cinderella world out there as much as I like to. But if we had stronger moral direction, then I think a lot of that would not be happening.
I wonder sometimes if you do get tired of those kind of stories.
I get sick of them.
Yeah.
It's just, and Abby and I feel very similar about that.
Yeah.
Some of them, we feel it does need to be reported, but we do it only once because sometimes it's just heartbreaking. There was a story we did. Tobin went down to Brownwood. As we were recording this, it was yesterday. He did a story about 2 babysitters who were accused in the death of a 2-year-old child. And just the heartbreak that mother, when she came home to find the child unresponsive. I mean, that's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And so that's a hard story to read. And then they were showing pictures of the child, and you're just going, oh, that should not have happened. Should not have happened. So it's hard. That's the one down aspect of this job I don't like, is having to report those kind of stories. We try to keep it to a minimum as best we can, because it is hard to report on, but I still think it needs to be out there reported about so people know that's going on.
Well, it's ending on a positive note.
Yes.
I'll transition to this. It seems like things are looking up for the Texas Rangers, for the SMU Mustangs, maybe even for the Dallas Cowboys. We can say about the Rangers, they've won some games.
Even McMurray's playing well these days.
I left out McMurray. Yeah, McMurray's playing well. But I just want to say that clinging to the hope for the Cowboys really revolves around their coach making them run laps. We hope the record reflects something better.
And here a while back, I think on a Sunday afternoon, I popped in an old tape on the highlights of the Dallas Cowboys, and I now realize just how special it was those 3 years. Well, they won 3 Super Bowls in 4 years. And at the time, we were really taking a lot of that for granted. And now I'm realizing just how really special that era was with the talent they had. And now I wish I had paid more attention, but there were some great stories along the sidelines when I was covering the Cowboys. I always came home with a great souvenir from a Cowboy game. The Texas Stadium, they're playing the Philadelphia Eagles, and Randall Cunningham's the quarterback for the Eagles, and they're driving, Cowboys clinging to a late lead. They're playing at Texas Stadium. The crowd's going nuts. Eagles are down deep in Cowboy territory. They go for it on 4th down. Cowboy defense just blows the play up. And one of the Eagles got so mad, he took off his helmet and he flung it. And on that slick Texas Stadium turf, it made a straight line down the hash mark, came right to my feet. And it rolled right, and I picked it up. This is a helmet. This is an NFL helmet from the Philadelphia Eagles. And the guy was disgusted, walked off the field, and didn't come over to get his helmet. And so for about 30 seconds, I'm thinking, I'm going to have a great souvenir from a Cowboy game, till I felt this tap on the shoulder, and it was an Eagle equipment guy. Can I have the helmet, sir? I mean, it was like a bowling ball. He just flung that thing in a straight line, rolled right to my feet.
Imagine the promos we could create with that helmet if you still had it. Yeah.
I had it for about 30 seconds.
David Bacon. I don't know. Is it okay to call you living legend? Is that okay?
That's my Bobby. I'm living. Let's just leave it there.
Right, hey, man, thanks for
so
coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you for asking me.
Fun. What fun. So this is another one of Abilene's most interesting people, and questionably one of Abilene's most interesting people, David Bacon. Been on TV in Abilene since 1981. And wow, that's pretty impressive. And he's an impressive guy. And you can watch him every weeknight and Sunday nights too on KRBC with Abby Green. David is on at 6 and 10 p.m. And I don't know, just something about watching David Bacon on TV feels right.
Well, thank you.
And the conversations felt right the whole time. I want to give a big shout out to our ace producer, Travis Corrigan, who just today was named Employee of the Month here at the TV station at BigCountryHomepage.com. Great guy. I'm Danny Sims, your host, and we will see you next time. That's certainly the hope, right here at our podcast, Abilene People on BigCountryHomepage.com. Thank you for being with us.